Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this video. I hope you all enjoy it. Before we get started, I just want to say if you guys enjoy, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that. I think this video is going to be part of a larger series like I talked about last time. Um, there's been a lot of research that I've put into this one, so I would really appreciate it if you guys show some love. Anyway, so if you guys remember, last video we took a look at the warning from PragerU on Big Green. And so what I've done, and I showed you guys a sneak peek at the end of that video, is I've taken a look at all the arguments they make and I've been doing some research. Um, Unfortunately, there's a lot to talk about, so there's going to be multiple parts to this video. Originally I thought it was 3, but it could turn into 4, so we'll find out. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoy it and let's get right into it. So, the first thing that they start their video off with is talking about how Big Green is the richest and most powerful big. But they lied about the gross revenue of Nature Conservancy. Gross revenue is not 1 trillion like they said in the video, it's around 1 billion. That's 1/1000th of the number that PragerU reported. I found this by looking at their source, right? Their source was the tax return for Nature Conservancy. When you go to line 12, right, it shows their total revenue, which was 998 million. So unless someone just really doesn't know how to read numbers, there is no way that they pulled 1 trillion out of this, right? The only reason to put a number this big is if you're confident enough that nobody's going to check your sources. And if anybody does, the PragerU audience will probably just attack them for being a liberal or a lefty or a commie or something. Looking at the huge difference between their number and what I saw from looking at the source, I thought maybe I missed the $1 trillion figure somewhere. Like, I went through the entire tax return, I didn't find it, but I was like, maybe I missed it. So I went looking into other sources that talked about the revenue for the Nature Conservancy. And what I found was that there was in 2016 their revenue was 914 million. I went to look back to kind of like compare, right? So we have a 2016 revenue that was at 914 million. Unless revenue grew 1,000 times in the 3 years since 2016, then there's no way that it's $1 trillion, right? And both sources for these are going to be listed here for you guys. What I'm probably going to do is have these in the description, but unless or in case anybody wants this document, just go to Twitter, DM me and ask me for it and I will give this to you. You know, the more people that kind of like spread this information, the better it is. Anyway, but since they want to go talk about Big Green and how much money that they're spending, I want to talk about all the oil money that's being spent. All right, international spending on oil, gas is at least 775 billion to $1 trillion annually. Governments provide at least 775 billion to $1 trillion annually, not including other costs of fossil fuels related to climate change, environmental impacts, military conflicts and spending, and health impacts. What this means is that this figure doesn't include the costs for something like climate change impacts, like for example, more forest fires, right? Like though the cost of like dealing with more forest fires isn't figured into this number, or military conflicts and spending. So like wars that have to deal with oil and all that stuff are not figured into this to this number. So the actual related cost to oil is a lot more than this if we figure this stuff into it. In a 2015 study by the IMF, the unpaid costs of fossil fuels are upward of $5.3 trillion annually, which works out to a staggering $10 million per minute. In the G20, governments are providing to the tune of $444 billion per year between, and it's this part right here, between national subsidies, domestic and international finance. It's crazy, right? Also, Big Green is so powerful, but we're not on track to meet the Paris Accord standards. While some countries are phasing out coal, others continue to invest in new coal-fired plants. In addition, funding from private banks has increased each year since the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015, totaling USD $2.7 trillion between 2016 and 2019. The world is not on track to limit global warming as stipulated in the Paris Agreement. They make this whole big argument about how like these organizations like the Nature Conservancy or the World Wildlife Foundation, they're just so powerful. They're influencing governments. They're making all this money, right? Except if they're so big and powerful, how are we not even meeting the Paris Accord standards, right? It gets better. The US is circumventing their own policies. Many top fossil fuel producing states, including North Dakota and Wyoming, do not consistently report revenue losses from the tax breaks they provide. The federal government is threatening private banks with the loss of public subsidies if they do not continue financing oil and gas projects and limiting the ability of states to block interstate pipelines. Pretty crazy. It gets even better. Governments used COVID money for oil companies. The United States provided $72 billion in COVID 19 support for fossil fuels as of August 12, 2020. Many response measures, like new tax breaks, environmental and health regulation rollbacks, are not yet possible to quantify in full. The largest quantified amount to airline companies through the CARES Act was $58 billion as of August 12, 2020. There are no climate conditions attached to this package, but it prohibits airline companies from firing and furloughing workers and paying dividends. I included this part because I do want to acknowledge the fact that, um, the CARES Act did stipulate some conditions, except none of them are climate conditions, right? Which is the whole point of their video, is talking about how Big Green is so powerful, more powerful than Big Oil ever was, right? It's not true. If they're so powerful, there would likely be climate conditions attached to all this money that fossil fuels companies and oil companies are getting, right? And not to mention that this $72 billion number isn't even completely accurate, because we haven't even been able to total the amount of money that went towards fossil fuel industry from things like tax breaks, environmental and health regulation rollbacks, and then what I don't even have highlighted, there's royalty waivers and reductions, corporate bond buybacks for the fossil fuel sector. So there's a ton of money that went to this sector that we don't even have completely quantified yet. That's their first main argument. The next one that they talk about is that Fortune 500 companies, big banks, are giving money to Big Green. They cite Citi, and we're going to talk about this some more, but they mention, like, name any Fortune 500 company, and they're probably giving money to Big Green. And then they only cite Citigroup, right? Like, their only citation, go to their sources on the video, look at their sources. Their only source is Citigroup. That's it. But they say, name any company, right? I just feel like that's disingenuous. At the very least, you gotta say, like, Citigroup. But no. They say, name any company. It's ridiculous. They say many companies are doing this, but only cite Citigroup for committing $100 billion to combat global climate change. It's important to note that this was set to be done over a 10-year period from 2014 to 2023, but it was completed ahead of schedule in 2020. However, this wasn't just done for the environment. It was because the goal directly aligns with Citi's mission to provide financial services that enable growth and economic progress. The business that counts toward the goal generates positive risk-adjusted financial returns for Citi. So not only are they just, the point here is that, like, they're not just doing this because they care about the environment. Every investment Citi made has generated a return for them, a positive risk-adjusted return. They say so. This is from the source that PragerU cites. You go to their page, you copy and, like, paste the exact same link. This is it, right? Citigroup sustainability page. You go look at it, right? And you just read what they say. And even on their own source, like, they explain it better than PragerU does in their video. Why? Because, like, they don't care about the truth. Because they just want to convince people that, like, climate change is not real. And it's like, not a big deal, and it's just a few decades away. But yeah, Citi on that page explicitly says that The goals of their climate change initiative, right, directly align with their mission to provide financial services and enable economic growth and progress. All of the stuff they're doing is making money for Citigroup. This isn't just some benevolent corporate action. They're still winning. They're still making money. Anyway, despite this, Citi still has their hands in the oil industry. Citigroup Global Markets Inc. grabbed the lead in the oil and gas sector during the first quarter of the year. For a total credit deal of $1.4 billion, the bank leapfrogged its peers, rising from ninth place in 2019 to first place. And their environmental efforts are a result of peer or pressure from climate groups, but Citi and other banks still fall short and make empty promises. Citi has been vocal about its efforts to mitigate climate change. Climate journalist Emily Atkin adds that was in part the product of years of pressure from the Sierra Club and the Gwich'in, a group of indigenous peoples from whom the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is sacred. Atkin notes that Citi still hasn't sworn off funding for fracking or tar sands/oil sands projects. Bank of America and Morgan Stanley haven't yet ruled out investments in Arctic drilling. The Rainforest Action Network points out that Citi was recently identified as the world's third largest fossil funder, co-led a $1.25 billion bond issuance for TC Energy and its Keystone XL pipeline, and has remained a top financer of crude oil development in the environmentally fragile Amazon. It's also one of the 4 US banks working to set up their own oil and gas companies to buy out failing fossils. Citi as the worst Wall Street banker of coal power by a margin of 55%. And if Citi wants to back up its climate and indigenous rights rhetoric, it must end support for companies expanding fossil fuels across the board. So that's what we have so far, guys. If you go look at this page at the document on the right, we've gone through 2 of the points that Prager makes in their video. And this is what I haven't done yet. This is what's done. This is what's not done. So we have a lot to get through. I'm going to be working on the rest of this throughout the rest of the day, throughout tomorrow, and we're going to be uploading, as soon as I feel like I have enough research done, enough credible research done, because there's a lot here. Imagine that, like in a 4 or 5 minute video, they packed their shit with so much nonsense that it's going to take me probably 2 hours to go through everything. So on one side, we're going to learn a lot of interesting things about Big Green, and we're going to learn a lot of interesting things about Prager, the people funding them, their sources, and I think there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff that we might not have been familiar with. There's a lot of stuff that I wasn't familiar with. I mean, if you ask me, I really wouldn't have suspected them of literally multiplying a number by 1,000 fold just to make up a point. There we go. But with that being said, I don't want to let this run for too long, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know. The next one will probably be a little longer. I wasn't sure how long it would take me to get through this stuff, but I want to keep them in the 15-minute range, no longer than 20. We got through this one in about 12 minutes, so that's really good. That means the next video will have probably more research and data in it. But again, thank you guys. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Whoa. There we go. Sorry. Bye, guys.